Ready to move to the next level in your product career? I'm Shobhit from Intentional Product Manager. Join me as we discuss ways to help you stand out in your job search and your career so you can have more impact and make more money. Hey everyone, welcome to the Intentional Product Manager podcast. I'm Shobhit Shug. We help product managers position themselves as leaders, raise their impact, and grow their income. My guest is Gina Pasqua-Abeles, Senior Director of Product Management at Robinhood, where she leads trading products. Before that, she led product at Grubhub and ClassPass and began a career in SEO and growth. We're going to cover three themes: how the highest performing product managers actually work, how to use narrative to align up and across, and what great hiring and leadership look like when you move from product management to managing product managers. Gina, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So what we'll do is we'll begin with some warm-up questions to just get things going. So where did you grow up and what pulled you into tech in the first place?
Yeah, so I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm an East Coast born and raised, went to school on this side of the world. I post my studies in college, I lived in DC. I currently reside in New York. I got pulled into tech while I was living in DC. And at that point in time, it was sort of like product management wasn't really a thing. Tech companies were still kind of booming and up and coming. And so I sort of took it upon myself to seek out one of the only tech companies in the DC area, which was Living Social at the time, a daily deals site, and didn't look back. I've been in the tech space since.
So you've not covered Boston as the other main East Coast thing. I'll cover that for you. So we're good there. What's the first product decision that you owned end to end?
First product decision I owned end to end was probably in my first product role, which was at Living Social at the time. I had moved over from marketing. I was really focused on driving the SEO program there. I started working really closely with the engineers and product team, and they invited me just to be part of the product org, overseeing more of the growth side of things. And I was given an opportunity to make some key decisions on how we were setting up and implementing our tracking on the data side, which is actually really important for me coming from the SEO space. It's hard to measure and sort of feedback in the impact that you're having. You're obviously like trying to show the growth that you're driving, and I got to work directly with the engineers and set up exactly how we wanted to track that, which made a big difference in, the investment overall the company was making in marketing. That was probably like the first decision that I had a chance to like fully scope, really assess the options, and then, push a proposal forward.
You mentioned SEO. And so from your SEO days, what was maybe one lesson that still helps you as a product leader?
SEO, so I'm going way back, this is, over a decade ago, was evolving very, very quickly. And you really had to study the practice and sort of study what was happening, what the newest changes were. You'd be really good at problem solving, kind of assessing maybe why you weren't showing up in certain rankings or why, the site wasn't even being cited as much as you were hoping. And so I think the depth of thinking and sort of the problem solving space is probably the main thing that I took and then applied once I moved over into product.
What's maybe a non-obvious difference you felt moving from growth product to what we call core product management?
I think in growth, you tend to have more opportunities to iterate and test and do things very quickly. And this isn't always the case, but I do think that the risk is most of the time on the lower end, and it gives you the ability to be really nimble and test and learn. And you're sort of breathing and living that sort of culture of testing, learning. And you still do that once you move over into more of the, the core product space, the consumer facing product world. But depending on your focus, you're given opportunities to, you might be working on something that's like a 0 to 1 product. And so I think the risk factor just tends to be a little bit higher if you get it wrong, depending on the type of product you're overseeing, the feature you're overseeing, your responsibilities at the company. But I think you have less opportunities to embrace that sort of nimble mindset inside and out. You're often balancing how do we learn and test along with how do we, think very critically about what we're building, because the investment might be really high for the company. So the cost is very high. And making those key decisions along the way can be just higher risk in what you're doing.
And then last question before we jump right in, which is what's like maybe a small daily habit that keeps you effective?
I'm a big fan of learning, like continued learning. I kind of have grown my own career through a lot of time and investment in listening to podcasts, reading books, reading articles. You learn a lot day in and day out from the job and the people that you get to work with and learn from. But I think I've kind of just embedded into my daily routine little moments of time spent, external learning, if you will, especially with the rise of AI. There's just so much new that you can incorporate into your day to day, and also leading a team. I kind of want to stay on the cutting edge of what's available, and so I think creating that extra time and space outside of the tasks that wait for me when I open my computer to think about like how I'm continuing to expand and grow outside of my job.
Okay, now we're going to jump into a major section, which is career development and growth, and especially talking about top product managers and things they do, since you've seen so many. So you've seen product managers at ClassPass, Grubhub, now Robinhood. What are the top, I don't want to call it 10%, but like top certain number consistently do that others might not?
I do think this is a question that a lot of people are interested in. It's something that I often get asked in interviews when I'm talking to people that are interested in joining the team. And I think it's because people are hungry to understand what's working and what's not in the product space, just being how broad it is and how it's like hard to, it's not a list of check boxes, it's really like you need to be successful in a lot of different areas to be successful in the role. I think the things that I've seen across companies and across levels that PMs that really, really excel do well, there's probably two or three. One is definitely a like deep intrinsic desire to learn. I think like the curiosity that product managers have has to be driven from within and not like applied to they're approaching a school product or they're approaching their job. It's really like they have real interest in understanding something, whether it's like the user that we're building for, a new business we're trying to stand up, something about the discipline of product. People that come with that sort of internal drive to learn and grow tend to be successful in the role. People that are really low ego, I do think that I've seen quite a mix of different type of product managers out there, and I think it's dependent on the company that you work in. I tend to try to be in environments that breed success through like collaboration and through more of a team approach, if you will. And so something I always look for when I'm talking to potential candidates is how they kind of keep their ego in check with also being confident in the role. The humility factor is really important. And then maybe the third is an actual interest in what they're building. So if people are actually interested in the problems that they're solving and who they're building for, they tend to be really, really successful in the role as well. So a lot of it is like intrinsically driven.
I love especially the low ego aspect. I think that's something that not a lot of people mention. And one of my favorite books that I'm rereading, it's called The Ego is the Enemy. So it's a book on stoicism, and I'm going to recommend that as like one of the reads for PMs. You mentioned a few things like about product managers managing ambiguity. So how does that look like week to week at Robinhood?
I mean, there's a lot of ambiguity. I think it comes in different forms and shapes. As you get more senior in your career, the problems that you're working on become more ambiguous. They become more space for you to think creatively and figure out the right way to tackle a problem. But I think there's ambiguity even in like, if you're just starting out, how do you work with different types of partners? How do you step up to fill gaps overall? I think a lot of times, depending on what type of problem you're trying to solve, there's some level of ambiguity. You can always approach it through sort of breaking it down, like problem solving, breaking down the problem overall. So let's say you're given a task to, tackle some new business line or like a broad statement of something we might want to get into or might want to offer. that's a lot of ambiguity, right? There's a lot of room to sort of decide what that means. And I think it's the role of PMs to not try to tackle it all at once, but really break it down and go through it more methodically. And then you can apply that to at a more junior level to just how you are approaching, working with people and pushing like something forward that maybe the product you're working on isn't ambiguous, but the how you go about building it is. It's all the same process of sort of breaking it down and thinking critically about each step.
Let's add one more element. So product management is not a solo sport. You have engineering, design, stakeholders involved. So how do you bring them into an ambiguous problem like this?
I mean, it starts in the beginning, right? I often find that if there's especially cross-functional or sort of partner level friction or contention, it's through some misalignment that's happened along the way. And so if expectations are off, that normally will lead to some sort of conflict down the road. A way to help avoid that is through just bringing your partners in as soon as possible and then along for the journey and making it really clear what the roles and responsibilities are along the way. Something I've heard from time to time is the concept of like, to be efficient, people have to stay in their lanes and really understand what their role is. I haven't seen that in practice work out very well. I think that people that, especially in a high performance culture, want to provide as much value as they can. And I think that often means creating a partnership or sort of like a team level environment where people are brought in from the beginning and then are welcome to provide input, provide suggestions along the way. And I think, that tends to breed those strongest relationships too.
So Gina, let's talk about a different thing. So we were talking about leveling up. We're talking about product managers doing really well. A big level up for people is IC senior PM to managing folks. When you did that transition for the first time, what are some of the changes or shifts that you found most important?
For me, it happened sort of incrementally and organically through managing more of an intern APM type person to being the most senior person on the team in the next role I took, and sort of indirectly managing to then officially being put in that role. And so I do think that sort of like incremental, slow transition helped me learn along the way. I didn't just move, one day from being an ICPM into the other of being now I'm a manager of PMs. It was more of a multi-year transitional journey of me learning like the different ways to work based on the type of role when I was doing more of a dual role. I think some of the biggest things that I learned along the way, this wasn't like the, day one I realized, but is to learn how to sort of coach and support without doing. I think something I see a lot of PM leaders when they formally transition into more of a manager role try to do is recreate a lot of what they were doing, which was really successful, and sort of force it down on the people that they're now working with. And like I mentioned earlier, because product is so hard to define and like squishy, it's not a package up and it's going to work perfectly. Like people do things differently. And I think when you shift into that leader role, it's realizing that people are going to do things differently than you've done them. But how can you like coach and support them so that they're successful and not try to like work your way through them overall? And I think and that's the biggest learning. And I do think it takes time. I think the best way to set folks up for success is more of that like transitional type of growth into more of a leader type role versus a pick up and push transition. But it all comes down to like you have to change the way you're working essentially because it's a completely different job.
Following up on that, now that you're coaching managers of PMs, how do you coach them and avoid some of the mistakes that you've seen other managers of PMs make?
I love coaching managers of PMs. I think probably because I found like real inspiration and passion in leading people. And so now having a chance to lead other leaders is like, it's just an X factor on top of what I'm already enjoying doing. I think it's working through the day-to-day challenges and creating an environment where the folks on my team, whether they directly report to me or don't directly report to me, hopefully feel comfortable coming to me with, problems they might be having, advice, and then taking, again, like more of an organic relationship-based approach so that I am empowering the leaders that work with me to grow in their roles, but have a support system through me as they come across challenges.
Continuously talking more about coaching PM. So one of the things that is often talked in product management world is owning outcomes and not outputs. And so how does that tie into your coaching philosophy or coaching approach?
Yeah, I think it probably just ties into my general approach to product overall, which is understanding, making sure we're starting from a place of understanding what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. In every company I've worked in, there's a constant flood of, features that you could be launching, right? Whether it's competitors are launching them, users are asking for them, some exec at the company wants them. It's very easy to get kind of pushed into a trap of you have a never-ending roadmap that is providing value, but is sort of lacking that strategic thinking around the what are we doing and why are we doing it. So I never, even we're going through planning, I never want to look at the frame of what we're going to be focusing on next year from what we're going to be delivering solely. That's sort of the last step to look at. We do need to understand what we think we can accomplish, the ROI of that, the impact to the business, the impact to users. But the first part and the bulk of the conversation should be alignment around the why, like what are we focused on and why are we focused on it? Because if there's disagreement there too, it's going to breed a lot of pain later on. And so I think, that also changes the mindset of folks on the team around owning the output that they're having. I don't care if we launch 20 features if they have no impact. I would much rather us launch 10 that some of them have, some of them don't, but we're also learning along the way, and we're not just thinking about it as like here's what we're shipping. It's more of like, here's the value that we're shipping and the progression that we're making towards where we have all agreed we're trying to go.
You talked about growth of PM. So just trying to make a little bit of a practical advice for product managers. If let's say it's a mid-level PM, say senior PM looking to move to staff PM. I know those roles change across companies. What are some of the key pieces of advice or steps you would give them?
It really depends on the person and the type of role they're in. Let's assume it's a consumer-facing role. And it's someone who intentionally has already made the decision that they want to stay in a purely doer IC level role. I think it's really important to have those conversations and think deeply about the next step and the next step after that, so that when you move into the next level, you have a good idea of, again, like why and some confidence in, what you want to learn, where you want to grow, and then where you feel confident. But as they're making that transition, I think the things to keep important are like, what is the extra value that they're actually providing to the company and to the team too. I think people think, okay, as I get more senior, I want to take on gnarlier problems. I want to have, more complexity. I want to have more scope, however you define scope. I want to have more impact ultimately, but impact comes in different forms. And I've never seen a senior ICPM in a company just driving and executing and sort of focusing on their role. They're normally contributors at a much greater scale. They're people that across the org, people go to for input and advice. There are people that you see in different feedback channels that have nothing to do with the project that are providing feedback and suggestions in a very, of course, helpful, again, low ego type of way, not know-it-alls, but contributors on a different scale almost. They're people that are like mentoring. So you're not managing, but you will be mentoring. Like, how are you up-leveling the broader PM community at a company? And then I think the other thing is they're people that other leaders, especially like their direct line of leadership, look to help absorb to help absorb whatever it is, whether it's, people that can flex into different type of ways. They're really providing a lot of relief to those that are, working with them at a higher level as well.
I love your point on the fact that they're contributing beyond their immediate scope. I think that's something people miss.
I do. I think that's something people miss because I think they think, oh, these are the people that take on maybe the coolest problems or the 0 to 1s and the things that gets sort of spotlight and have C-team level oversight. And that might be true, but that's only a component. That's the type of work you're executing. The actual role you're playing is much broader because there's normally not a lot of, very senior PMs at a company, depending on the scale of the company, of course. But it's not like everyone at a company is going to be a principal PM. Realistically, you're not going to have the scope for it. So to be in that role, you have to be seen as a leader, even if you're not like leading people.
We're going to now transition, talk about something that's related. I mean, especially as you think of broader scope, like all about storytelling and influence. You said that story often aligns stakeholders across and up. How would you think of like somebody who's really trying to get better at storytelling, maybe like a simple structure for building up a story that gets buy-in?
Yeah, I think storytelling and sort of the narratives that you're creating are a really important part of being successful in your role, regardless of the level that you're in. If you're in a product management role, you have to be getting buy-in. You have to be forming alignment. And a lot of that is driven through the narrative that you're building and then the confidence that people have in that narrative. And so it's probably one of my favorite topics to coach PMs on because I do think it's one that takes time and takes practice and application. But if I was having a conversation with someone who wanted to kind of break it down a little bit, some key components, I think your narrative has to be very, very clear and ideally repeatable. So it doesn't have to be a 10-page doc. It should really be a sentence of what you're trying to accomplish. And that sentence should be communicating the importance behind it. And you should always go back to it, right? And so there should never be confusion across partners or leaders on what you're working on, why you're working on it, because the narrative is so clear because you've crafted it. And then the story behind it has to really be focused on like what's most important. I find, especially with more junior PMs, the desire to deliver is so strong that includes delivering information and really wanting to make like the strongest case possible. And so I've gotten like 60-page PRDs before. What you need is a page tops that really is communicating the most critical information around what problems you're trying to solve, why they're important, the risk of not solving them, and then the opportunity that you have. And then that's all kind of tied together with the overarching storyline, if you will, which should be more of a repeatable narrative you can bring into discussions.
I love that. Reminds me of that quote, right? Like, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one.
Right, exactly. It might take more time, too. Yeah, it takes more time. It takes more attention to detail to strip out the secondary and information that might not be the headline. Especially is important when you start to work at an executive level, the folks you're dealing with and talking to have so much information coming at them that they're probably only going to remember one or two things in a discussion. Even if it's an hour-long discussion with like the CEO of a company, the person's not going to remember everything. And so you need to think critically before going in, especially when you're talking to leaders around what is most important for this person to walk away with, and then form your whole story around that and just kind of hammer it over and over and over again.
It's interesting. You spoke about two things. I'm going to try to tie this together, like storytelling and alignment. So in alignment, what are some signs you might look at to try to figure out, is there alignment or the room or the people are not actually aligned yet?
I really like anchoring on goals. And so having that be a central point, whether it's in a doc or it's at the start of a meeting or whatever, it's aligning back to the goal of what we're trying to accomplish, whether it's at a project level or just from that meeting. It's really hard to know if you have alignment if you just kind of jump into the more tactical pieces or, discussing how you're going to do certain things. It's, again, I think aligning on the why and getting almost like explicit verbal yes, we're all aligned on this, so now we can all move forward. And then you have to keep doing that along the way. It's not a one-time thing. But you don't want to be on conversation 4 and realize in conversation 1 you weren't aligned on something.
Couple more questions for this entire process. Like when you're helping someone prepare for a significant meeting, what are like some ways you might prep before and try to figure out what objections or challenges they might run into?
Yeah, I think it depends on who the meeting's for, whether it's for your partners or whether it's for, again, like approval, talking to more of a leadership group, how you prep for that discussion. Because is it more of this is where the step where we're bringing people in, they're my partners. I want to prepare so it's a really fruitful discussion that we walk away with what we're trying to accomplish. The preparation for that might look like aligning on the key things that you want to, step away with, and then maybe even have other people drive if you're at that point in a project. Just making sure it's very, very clear to yourself walking into the meeting, like what you're trying to get out of the conversation and the key things that you want those partners to both learn in the meeting, and then the next steps, ideally from the meeting, you should know before going into it. Versus, let's say you are presenting to other leaders within the organization, the preparation for that is going to look probably a little bit different. The key overlap between the two is, I think, the self-reflection up front of what am I trying to get out of this discussion? What does success look like for me? And what do I need to make sure happens for my success coming out of this meeting overall? And so that might be, again, like what are the 1 or 2 things that we want these people to walk away with? Do you need explicit sign off on something? So the preparation is probably a little bit different. The string between it, and like what I do encourage PMs on every team I've worked on to do is like spend time before a meeting and just write down the 3 things that you want to make sure happen in that meeting, and then keep that in front of you the whole time. And your chances of having a successful discussion will be higher.
One more question on this, because you're seeing this across so many different companies. Do you see like even differences in all these companies and how alignment happens, how meetings run, or has it been more similar than different?
I mean, different companies have different frameworks that they use. I've worked at companies in the past that use like more of a DASI framework, or, they have all these different frameworks to just make sure it's really clear who's driving, who you're getting input from, who's actually deciding. So the actual framework I have seen differ basically in every company, but it's a different flavor of the same framework, which is just having very clearly defined more of the roles and responsibilities that are needed to reach the point of like a decision's made and we're all aligned on that decision. But there's so many different frameworks out there you can use.
So in our last major section, let's talk about hiring and leadership. Very important topic here. Let's start with the basic questions. But when you think of hiring and managing PMs across these multiple companies, what do you first look for in a PM candidate?
It's going to be a little bit repetitive with what makes a PM successful that I've seen ultimately. I immediately look for people that are low ego and team first. And that comes through how people talk about their experiences, even how they answer questions to some degree, the assumptions they're making along the way. But I want someone who is presenting themselves as a contributor, not like the only person that matters in the role that they were in. The other key thing is somebody who's demonstrated learning. I explicitly look for that. I'm looking for, are you taking classes? Are you reading? Are you listening to podcasts? How are you betting yourself outside of the role? Your chance of growth accelerates the time you put into it. And so if the only time you put into it is the 9 to 5 that you have, you're not going to be as strong and you're not going to grow as quickly either. And so I do look for people that are interested in learning and have that demonstrated somehow. And then last but not least is really around problem solving. I tend to go off script in interviews. I'm always asked to follow a certain script or rubric. And I find the best way to really assess people is there's just so much prep you can do for product interviews these days that it becomes a little bit templatized. And I think you sort of lose that creative element. And you can pick up on that as well. And so I do tend to just go off script and try to like dig into the problem solving piece a little bit by pulling away from past experiences or more of the like, standard sort of test cases you can run through to just like jump around and poke at people's thinking.
I love the going off script. I used to love doing that as well at Google and almost like be very abrupt. And my interviewees might think, hey, like, why is this person so abrupt? It's because I got the signal and I wanted to test something off script. Now, one thing you didn't mention is like domain knowledge and things like that. So how important is that versus product management skill sets?
I think it's dependent upon the role that we're hiring for. I tend to value the person, the potential, and the sort of product craft more than the domain knowledge. That might just be based on my own personal experience. I've worked at, 7, 8 different companies, totally different industries. I joined Robinhood with no fintech experience to oversee our advanced trading products. I think if you are somebody who, especially if you're later in your product career, learning the domain and the space, I have a lot more confidence in than somebody who maybe has 5, 6 years in product, hasn't demonstrated growth, but really, really knows the space and the domain. I would choose somebody who has like shown growth in product, shows a real like desire to continue growing in product, over maybe an expert in the domain. I think you can learn that. I mean, it's hard to think of examples where you can't learn a domain. I have seen examples of people that can't learn product.
Let's talk a bit more, like even earlier, looking at resumes or portfolios or other representations prior interviews. What are things that help give that strong signal for you at that stage?
They're probably just really basic things like how are they communicating in the documents that they're sharing? How clear, even, little things like how consistent is the formatting? How many buzzwords versus actual, meaty content is in here, how people talk about their past experiences, like what type of things are they highlighting, if it seems like they're highlighting what they were asked to do versus the impact that they actually had, that's a signal. So, I think it's like the prep and thought that was put into things as simple as a resume or a cover letter.
What about like things like certificates? A lot of people doing learnings and they get certificates around that. Does that give you a signal of any sort?
A certificate in of itself doesn't, but the pairing of, any sort of external learning certification and the person does. So if that's as we're discussing and there's a interesting why, like I was in a role and I found I was really struggling to partner with design partners. So I spent time studying UX and doing that, on weekends. That's really interesting to me because that signals a bunch of different things, people that are actioning on their own growth, actioning on how they're learning. But if it's just a laundry list of here's all the things I've studied, that's a little bit less interesting because I don't really know how that was applied or why that time was put in.
Seems like maybe I'm reading this between the lines, but it's like almost was the learning part of their career narrative.
Right. Was the learning part of their personal self-growth, was thought put into it, was real interest there? Or was it, I heard this is good to have on my resume, so I did it.
I love that framing of how it helped them grow as well. So with that, I'm going to start our last lightning round just to get some last answers before we wrap up. What's one metric you love to see on Product Manager's weekly scorecard?
I like to see engagement-based metrics, that signals like how repeat usage is being affected based off of what we're contributing versus one-time sort of base metrics.
Your favorite product teardown question, if any?
So I like asking what people like using and then digging in from there. So what is a product that you really like using and then why? And then, as simple as like, how would you change this to, let's create a false, scenario and apply more questions from there of like, what if you had an opportunity to do XYZ with this product? What would you do? But basing it in like, what are people actually enjoying using?
Last couple of things. A meeting you killed that nobody misses.
Just reoccurring meetings that are on the calendar and people forget why they're on the calendar. You know, I think it's at every single company I've been at. I went to on maternity leave. I came back and it was one of my favorite things to do when I came back was just what is reoccurring that isn't serving the full purpose that it was initially meant to serve.
And then let's do some New York quick hits. So best coffee in Brooklyn.
The coffee that I make at home in my French press. We buy this Italian coffee, like ground coffee that we buy in bulk. And I think it's the best coffee I've ever had. So yeah, I'm an at-home Fresh Prince girl.
And then a last question, which is a two-part question. A book that you gift others and a product that you love that very few people really know about.
So a book that I gift others, and I have gifted this to a few folks, is The $1 Trillion Coach with Bill Campbell. I try to read that once a year. I find it very inspirational. Gives a good sense of the type of leader that I would like to be. And a product that I love that very few people know about. You know, I'm interested because my sense of whether or not people know about it might not be right. I don't think I have one. I think every product that I use, people are going to know about it.
Gina, this was amazing. Like, I learned so much about leadership, hiring, alignment, storytelling. So thank you for opening up and sharing your playbook with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was fun.
Since we enjoyed it so much, like, tell us more, where could people follow your work? Any talks you do?
I'm a relatively private person, honestly. You can follow me on LinkedIn. We also here at Robinhood have started to do more events as a community building way to showcase what we're doing. So we've had a few of those this year. I had an opportunity to co-host a live stream with our CEO, Vlad, back in June to announce 2 products that we're launching. And then more recently at our big Hood Summit that we had in Vegas, I had an opportunity as well to participate in the keynote. So I guess if you're following Robinhood and paying attention to what we're doing for just live streams and events, then you'll also hopefully see more of me there too.
I'll be sure to get the links for those events and put it in the show notes so people can follow that. So once again, Gina, thanks again for appearing in today's show.
Thank you so much. It was really fun.
And then for listeners, if you want to position yourself for leadership, craft a signature narrative, and land roles you're proud of, you can find resources at intentionalproductmanager.com. And look, if you enjoyed today's show, like, all I ask for is subscribe, share it with a product manager who needs it, and I'll see you again in the next episode. Hey, be sure to check out our website at intentionalproductmanager.com to see how you can level up in your career.